Before we begin, if you enjoy deep space suspense, impossible human courage, and stories where the galaxy learns not to underestimate us, make sure to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss the next HFY chapter. The bounty announcement hit the galaxy like a shockwave. Elias Ward watched the holographic projection flicker above the cantina's cracked counter, its blue light reflecting in the untouched glass of mineral whiskey at his elbow. The Galactic Council's crest, cold, metallic, and humorless, spun once before the message replayed for the third time. By order of the High Tribunal, a reward of 50 million credits is offered for the confirmed termination of the apex predator designated Veros 9 specimen. Lethal force authorized. Extreme caution required. The words were clinical, but the room responded with a ripple of fear. Conversations dwindled into nervous whispers. Gruff mercenaries, men and women whose armor still dripped with the dust of battlefields, exchanged uneasy glances as though the creature itself might stalk through the door at any moment. Elias noted their tension but kept his expression blank. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass and pretended not to listen as a trio of bounty hunters argued behind him. "That thing gutted a dropship from the outside," one muttered, voice trembling. "Ripped the hull apart like it was soft foil." "You believe everything the council spits out?" another scoffed, though fear thinned the bravado in his tone. "Stories get inflated. Maybe it's dangerous, sure, but—" "No," the third interrupted. "I saw the footage. Whatever it is, it's not just dangerous. It's a nightmare." Elias let out a slow breath and finally took a sip. The whiskey burned, but not enough. The apex predator. The galaxy's living terror. The council's favorite scapegoat. And the creature Elias knew better than anyone alive. He wiped a speck of dust from his jacket sleeve and rose from the stool just as the shuttle's engines roared outside. A moment later, the cantina doors parted, admitting a crisp gust of desert air and a tall figure in council envoy armor. The envoy didn't look at the others. He walked straight to Elias. "Elias Ward?" His voice was polished, precise, too clean for the outer rim. Former Terran Ranger. Distinction in 7 military theaters. Survivor of the Veros campaign. Elias didn't respond. He simply tossed a few credits on the counter and headed for the exit. The envoy followed. "We have reason to believe the predator has moved into this sector," the envoy pressed. "Given your history, your cooperation would be appreciated." Elias stopped. Slowly. "My history," he repeated, turning just enough to meet the envoy's eyes. A flicker of confusion crossed the man's face as if he expected that phrase to trigger obedience or guilt. It triggered neither. "Yes," the envoy continued. "Your survival during the Veros incident, though fortunate, has given you unique insight. The council believes." "The council believes a lot of things," Elias said. "Most of them convenient." The envoy stiffened, clearly unused to dissent. "You do not dispute the danger this creature poses?" Elias studied him, weighing how much truth he dared to spill. The outpost's dome loomed behind the envoy like a cracked eggshell under the rising twin suns. The dry wind whistled through metal remnants of abandoned machinery. Elias could feel the uneasy stares of the cantina patrons boring into his back, waiting for a confrontation. Finally he said, "The danger comes from the people hunting it." The envoy's brows knit. "That is not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Elias stepped past him and headed down the dirt track leading toward the landing pads. He could hear boots crunching behind him, other mercenaries drawn like insects to fresh credits. They didn't know him, but his name carried weight, especially in places where people made a living betting on survival odds. A burly Merc jogged to catch up, beard braided with metal beads that clinked when he moved. "Ward," he called. "You heading out to track the beast too?" "No." "That's funny," the Merc said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Because rumor says you're the only man who ever walked away from it." Elias kept moving. Another voice chimed in, sharp and youthful. "You saw it up close, right? What was it like?" Then, with lowered tone, "Does it really tear ships apart?" Elias could have lied. It would have been easier. But the truth had a gravity of its own. He stopped again, scanning the open sand stretching toward the jagged ridgeline far in the distance. Heat shimmered across the dunes, warping the horizon into a wavering illusion. "The predator isn't a monster," Elias said. "Not by its own nature." The Merc stared, startled. "Then what is it?" one asked. Elias watched a shuttle rise into the sky, thrusters kicking up spiraling dust. He waited until it became a bright speck disappearing toward the higher atmosphere. "It's something that doesn't need to be hunted," he said. "Not by you. Not by anyone." The Merc with the braided beard frowned. Council says it killed a dozen soldiers last month. It did, Elias said. Because they opened fire first. The air grew heavier. Even the wind seemed to pause as though the desert itself listened. The envoy caught up again, frustration finally breaking through his polished exterior. Mr. Ward, with respect, if you know anything about this creature's whereabouts, you are obligated by interstellar law to report it. The longer it remains at large, the more systems are at risk. Elias studied the envoy's immaculate armor that had never seen real dirt, real blood, or real truth. Then he looked back toward the ridgeline where, miles away, something powerful and loyal and infinitely misunderstood waited. I won't help you kill it, Elias said. He took a step backward, as though already distancing himself from everything the envoy represented. His voice dropped, carrying the quiet certainty of someone who had faced the abyss and learned its name. Find another hunter. He turned, leaving the envoy speechless and the mercenaries murmuring among themselves, torn between greed and instinctive fear. Elias walked without haste, but with purpose, moving toward the desert's edge and the concealed route only he knew. As he reached the last habitation module, he paused briefly and glanced over his shoulder. Half the galaxy wanted the apex predator dead. None of them understood what would happen if they succeeded. And none of them knew why every attempt had failed. He adjusted the strap of his pack and continued walking, a sliver of a smile touching his lips, not of amusement but of inevitability. If the Council wanted a war against the creature he'd saved, the creature he trusted, they were already losing. And soon someone else would discover exactly why. The ridge loomed like a fractured spine against the pale horizon, jagged shadows cutting through the sand as Elias climbed the narrow path carved between ancient stone. He moved with practiced silence, every step deliberate. By the time he reached the hidden plateau, the suns had dipped just enough to cast the world in a copper glow. The air was cooler here, touched by faint mountain winds, and carrying a low rhythmic vibration that he felt before he heard. A shape emerged from behind the outcrop, massive and fluid despite its size. Obsidian plates shimmered along its back, catching the fading light like polished armor. Its eyes glowed faintly, bright slits of molten amber tracking his approach. Rays lowered its head. Elias set his pack down and approached without hesitation. The predator's breath stirred the dust at his boots, hot and heavy but not hostile. He reached up, touching the smooth curve between two plates where the armor thinned, and the creature exhaled a sound that was almost relief. Long day, Elias murmured. You stayed hidden? Rays responded with a soft rumble that vibrated through the ground. If any of the mercenaries who crowded the outpost below could hear it, they would have taken it as a warning. Elias knew better. This was greeting. Recognition. Trust. He checked the creature's flank, running a careful hand over the healed scars that Council scientists would have studied with morbid fascination. The flesh beneath the armor was warm and unthreatening. Rays had been restless lately, sensing the rising tension across the desert. Even without words, it understood pursuit. Elias retrieved a canister of nutrient paste from his pack, cracking the seal before placing it on the flat rock nearby. Rays sniffed once, then consumed the offering in great, efficient bites. Elias watched, not with amusement but with the quiet awareness of someone observing a partner rather than a pet. When Rays finished, Elias knelt beside it, brushing away the dust that clung to its plating. The Council's tightening the net, he said. They announced the bounty. Every hunter this side of the spiral will be coming. Rays' eyes narrowed as though processing the shift in his tone. Its tail struck the ground once, sharp, decisive. Yeah, Elias said softly. I know. He settled beside the creature, leaning against its massive shoulder. The warmth radiating from its armored body dampened the chill from the plateau wind. For a moment, silence enveloped them. A moment where neither hunter nor prey existed. Only a man and the being whose life he had once saved, and who had saved his in return. His mind drifted to the day they first met on Veros 9, when he'd found the creature trapped beneath blasted rubble, bleeding but defiant. The Council soldiers had fired on sight. Elias had stood between them, an impulsive choice that still shaped every hour of his existence. He'd paid dearly for that decision, court-martialed, reassigned, eventually discarded. They called him compromised, contaminated by alien empathy. But Rays remembered that day differently. The creature had imprinted on him, forging a bond stronger than duty or doctrine. A bond the Council could never comprehend, and now sought to destroy. A distant clang echoed from below. Elias stood immediately, scanning the descent path. Rays rose behind him, muscles coiling beneath armor plates. Two mercenaries ascended the ridge, moving with caution but not enough stealth to hide from Ray's senses. Elias recognized one of them, the braided-beard brute from the cantina, now accompanied by a lankier partner with a long rifle slung across his back. Elias stepped forward, blocking their path. "Turn around." The bearded Merc held up both hands. "Easy. We're not here to start something." "You already did by coming here," Elias replied. Ray's prowled to Elias's side, head lowering, amber eyes locked onto the intruders. The rifleman froze, eyes widening. "Oh hell, it's real. That thing's actually—" "Quiet," the bearded Merc hissed, though his own voice betrayed fear. Sweat beaded across his brow despite the cooling air. "Ward, listen. We don't want trouble. The council's envoy is asking questions. He thinks you know where the predator is. Some idiots think you're helping it." Elias didn't react. Ray's did, lifting its head slightly, assessing the strangers. "Some think you're working with it," the Merc continued, slower now. "Some think you're using it." "And you?" Elias asked. The man swallowed. "I think you're not trying to get anyone killed. But there's a lot of credits floating around and some hunters don't care what they shoot." Elias nodded once. "Then you understand why you need to leave." The rifleman glanced at Ray's, unable to hide the tremor in his breath. "Ward, how are you standing next to that thing? Because it doesn't see me as a threat." The bearded Merc's gaze flickered between man and creature. He whispered, "The council said it was mindless. They said it killed without provocation. They said what they needed people to believe," Elias said. Ray stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The mercenary stumbled back, but Ray's didn't lunge. It simply positioned itself between Elias and the intruders, a silent declaration more eloquent than any words. The bearded Merc exhaled shakily. "I get it. I'll tell the others to steer clear. But Ward, the envoy isn't going to stop." "I know," Elias said. The Merc hesitated, torn between greed and newfound caution. Then he turned, starting the climb down. His partner followed, glancing back once as though he needed to confirm the sight wasn't a hallucination. When they were gone, Elias approached Ray's, resting a hand against its neck. "You handled that well." The creature's low hum resonated through the plateau, a sound of reassurance rather than triumph. Night edged closer, painting the sky in violet hues as Elias surveyed the desert below. More hunters would come. More questions. More danger. The council's reach was long, and the bounty would stir every desperate gunman in the sector. But today had revealed something important. The mercenaries didn't run screaming. They didn't fire. They saw Ray's beside him and hesitated. Maybe fear wasn't the only reaction the galaxy was capable of. Elias turned toward the creature that had become the center of a conflict large enough to reshape systems and topple governments. Ray's nudged him gently as though urging him to rest, to breathe, to trust. "We'll be ready," Elias said. Ray's eyes glowed brighter in the dimming light, reflecting unwavering loyalty. And as darkness descended across the plateau, both man and predator waited, not for escape but for whatever force dared climb the ridge next. The mercenary outpost changed overnight. Word of what the bearded hunter had seen on the ridge traveled faster than any official broadcast, weaving through supply lines, docking bays, and crowded bars until every soul on the settlement carried some version of the same question. Why hadn't the apex predator killed Elias Ward? Rumors warped with each retelling. Some claimed Elias controlled the creature with forbidden tech, others swore he was part of a secret Terran breeding program, and a few insisted he had been blessed or cursed by alien spirits. Yet beneath all the exaggerations a single truth pulsed like a heartbeat: the predator hadn't attacked. And that alone was enough to unsettle the entire mercenary community. Elias noticed the shift as he returned to the outpost for supplies the following morning. People stared longer, whispered harder. Where once they had seen a veteran drifter, now they saw someone tangled in the galaxy's greatest enigma. Some nodded respectfully, wary but not hostile. Others kept one hand near their holsters. He ignored them all, moving quickly through the crowded bazaar until he reached a vendor known for discretion. The old Telnari behind the stall counted out rations, but his usually steady hands trembled. "You walk with the shadow of death at your side," the alien muttered, eyes darting to the desert. "Many wish to know why." "They should worry less about me," Elias said, "and more about who's coming after them." The Telnari swallowed and looked down. Elias paid for the supplies and left without further conversation. He'd nearly reached the exit gate when a group of mercenaries blocked his path. Not aggressive, at least not yet, but clearly intent on speaking with him. The bearded hunter stood at their front, posture rigid, gaze steady. Behind him were 5 others, veterans by the look of their gear, patched armor, scarred rifles, and the unmistakable aura of people who had survived too many battlefields. "Ward," the leader said. "We need to talk." Elias weighed his options. Reyes was hidden a few kilometers beyond the ridge. Revealing impatience now would only heighten suspicion. So he kept his tone measured. "Conversation or confrontation?" "Conversation," the Merc replied. "For now. Then make it quick." The leader exchanged a glance with the others before speaking. "We're refusing the bounty." Surprise flickered through the crowd nearby. Even Elias raised a brow. "That's a lot of credits to turn down." "Not worth dying for," one of the younger Mercs muttered. "We saw you yesterday. The beast listens to you. That's not natural." "It listens because it chooses to," Elias said. The Merc leader nodded. "Exactly. And that means it has judgment. Awareness." The council said it was feral, uncontrollable. "But it left us alive." "Only because you backed down," Elias corrected. "Or because you told it to," another Merc countered. "Either way, we want the truth." Elias scanned their faces, curiosity, caution, and a flicker of something else. Respect maybe. Or fear tempered by new understanding. These weren't green bounty hunters chasing glory. These were seasoned soldiers trying to make sense of an impossible contradiction. "You want the truth," Elias said quietly. "Fine." The council lied. "They're hunting race kind because they couldn't control them. The predator didn't start the war, they did." Murmurs rippled through the group. A few exchanged uneasy glances. Others leaned in as though hearing something they'd long suspected but never dared articulate. "So it's a purge," the bearded Merc said. "A cover-up," Elias replied. Reyes defended its territory. The council retaliated with extermination orders. "I happened to be in the way." "And it didn't kill you?" "No," Elias said. "It saved me." The group fell silent, stunned by the inversion of every story they had ever been told. Finally the Merc leader exhaled. "We're done hunting it. Word will spread. Others might follow." Elias didn't let himself relax. "Or they'll come faster, trying to finish the job before competition dries up." The Merc's jaw tightened. "That envoy's already recruiting fresh muscle. He wants this wrapped before the week's out." Of course he did. The council couldn't afford witnesses, especially ones who had spoken with Elias. Before Elias could respond, a tremor rolled through the ground. Not violent but unmistakable. The mercenaries drew weapons on instinct. Several civilians scrambled for cover. Elias didn't move. "Stand down." The Merc leader froze. "Is that?" Reyes emerged from the far dunes in a silent, fluid stride, armor plates shimmering like living obsidian. Gasps tore through the bystanders. A few men bolted, sprinting for the safety of the nearest structures. Others stared, unable to reconcile myth with reality. The predator halted beside Elias, towering but calm. Its gaze swept the gathered mercenaries, not predatory but evaluating. Waiting for a reason to act. Elias stepped closer to the creature, placing a steadying hand against its neck. "This is what you feared," he said to the group. "Not a monster. Not a mindless engine of destruction. Something intelligent. Something capable of restraint." The bearded Merc swallowed, eyes fixed on Reyes. "Capable of killing us all in the blink of an eye." "Everything alive is capable of killing," Elias replied. "Civilization is just choosing not to." Reyes lowered its head slightly, the gesture both a warning and an acknowledgement. Elias could feel the creature's tension, coiled, alert, protective. It didn't trust the crowd, and rightly so. Too many weapons. Too many eyes searching for weakness. The mercenaries slowly holstered their rifles. The leader nodded toward Elias. "We're out. No bounty is worth crossing something that chooses peace and still looks like that." "And the others?" Elias asked. "We'll talk to them," the Merc promised. "Show them what we saw." Elias appreciated the attempt, though he doubted it would be enough. The council wouldn't let the truth spread unchecked. They would send enforcers next, maybe assassins. And Reyes would be the first target. The Merc crew turned back toward the outpost, their steps quick and their eyes lingering on the creature at Elias's side. Civilians parted in silence as they passed, whispering wildly. Some with awe, others with terror. When the last of them disappeared behind the settlement gate, Elias exhaled slowly. "You made an impression," he said to Reyes. The predator tilted its head, amber eyes narrowing in what almost resembled amusement. "They still don't understand," Elias murmured. "But they're beginning to doubt." Reyes brushed its massive head against his shoulder, a small grounding gesture amid the rising storm. Elias looked toward the horizon. He could feel the shift in the air, the way news spread like sparks across dry brush. Soon it would ignite something bigger than fear. Something the council couldn't smother with bounties or lies. "Come on," he said quietly. This was only the first wave. Rays moved beside him, silent and immense, as the two disappeared back into the desert where the next confrontation waited, already drawing closer. The council did not bother with subtlety. Their warships breached the atmosphere at dawn, carving fiery trails across the sky as though setting the heavens aflame. Elias watched from the ridge, jaw tightening as the first dropships broke formation and descended toward the outpost. Ray stood beside him, posture rigid, eyes glowing like molten coals beneath the rising suns. The air vibrated with the thrum of engines, cold, disciplined, merciless. These were not bounty hunters chasing a payout. These were council forces sent to end a problem. "They're early," Elias muttered. Rays emitted a low growl that rumbled through the stone under their feet. It was not fear but recognition. The council had hunted its kind before, it knew this sound too well. Elias adjusted the rifle slung across his back, though he doubted it would make much difference. Against infantry perhaps. Against armored units and strike squads? Not much. But he hadn't survived Vero's 9 by relying solely on firepower. Below, the outpost erupted into motion. Mercenaries scrambled across rooftops, civilians fled toward underground shelters, and shopkeepers dragged metal shutters over their stalls. The chaos spread quickly but not without direction. Elias could see the bearded Merc shouting orders, guiding people to safe zones. Maybe fear had forged clarity in him. A trio of dropships landed on the outskirts, dust clouds swirling around their armored hulls. Council soldiers poured out, gunmetal armor, visors tinted blue, movements perfectly synchronized. These were elite enforcers, the kind deployed when diplomacy had failed and silence was required. Elias descended the ridge at a controlled sprint, Rays matching his pace with ground-shaking strides. When they reached the perimeter, the mercenaries turned, relief and dread warping their expressions. "You brought the beast?" the bearded Merc asked, voice cracking. "It's not a beast," Elias said. "It's an ally. Does it know the difference between soldiers and civilians? It knows who fires first." That answer would have to be enough. A warning shot cut through the air, sizzling past a storage tank. The council commander stepped forward, removing his helmet with ceremonial precision. His face was sharp, immaculate, the face of a bureaucrat playing soldier out of obligation rather than necessity. "Elias Ward," he called out, projecting authority. "You are hereby ordered to surrender the apex specimen. Its execution is mandated by tribunal decree." Rays took a step forward, plates rising like the unfurling of black wings. The commander flinched but recovered quickly. "It is a threat to civilization," he continued. "Stand aside." Elias stepped forward instead. "Civilization? You're exterminating a species because they refuse to kneel." The commander's gaze hardened. "We purge threats. We prevent chaos." "You create chaos," Elias replied. "And call it order." The commander raised a gloved hand. Soldiers leveled their rifles. The mercenaries tensed, gripping weapons that suddenly felt inadequate. Elias felt Ray shift beside him. The creature wasn't afraid. It was focused. The first shot detonated against the ground, sending a shockwave of dust across the field. Council forces advanced, methodical and brutal, firing controlled bursts. Mercenaries retaliated from behind cover, though their firepower barely dented the incoming tide. Rays launched forward. The Predator moved with ferocity and precision, each leap turning the battlefield into a blur of motion. It struck the front line like an obsidian storm, sweeping soldiers aside with bone-crushing force. Armor buckled beneath its claws. Weapons shattered. The creature roared, the guttural sound rippling through the air and disorienting even hardened troops. Elias took advantage of the chaos, sprinting between scattered barricades, firing at exposed weak points. He barked instructions to the mercenaries, turning panic into measured resistance. "Don't cluster. Spread the fire. Focus on the flanks." The bearded Merc followed his lead, rallying others to reposition. Suddenly, the ragtag defenders fought with cohesion, forcing the enforcers into a narrower advance. But the council had numbers. More dropships landed. Heavy walkers emerged, four-legged armored machines with cannons mounted along their spines. Elias swore under his breath. Walkers weren't built to fight infantry, they were built to extinguish it. Rays slammed into the first walker before it could brace its legs. Metal shrieked as the predator's weight toppled it sideways. The impact triggered a cascading collapse of internal systems, sparks erupting from its joints. Rays tore through the chassis, ripping out a core component with terrifying efficiency. The victory was brief. 2 more walkers advanced, cannons spooling with lethal energy. "Rays?" Elias shouted. The predator darted toward him, narrowly avoiding a blast that vaporized an entire stack of containers. Elias threw himself behind a generator tower as the ground shook from the shockwave. They couldn't hold the outpost. Not against this. The commander strode forward through the chaos, confident despite the destruction. "Ward, this ends now. Surrender the creature and we will spare your life." Rays snarled, but Elias lifted a hand to steady it. He stood, leveling his gaze at the commander. "Sparing lives isn't your specialty," Elias said. The commander's expression twisted. "The galaxy is safer without that abomination." Elias stepped closer, voice firm. "The galaxy is safer without men who fear what they can't control." In that moment the commander made his decision. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Elias. Rays moved first. The creature leapt between them, intercepting the shot. The energy bolt struck its armor, blasting shards of heated metal into the sand. Rays staggered but did not fall. Its eyes burned with a fury Elias had not seen since Veros 9. The commander faltered. Elias didn't. He fired once, disabling the commander's rifle, sending it spinning into the dirt. Mercenaries surged forward, forcing the remaining soldiers into retreat. The commanders of the walkers, realizing they were losing control of the field, activated extraction beacons. The dropships began lifting off, abandoning the assault. Within minutes, the council forces withdrew into the sky's burning horizon, leaving smoke, scars and silence in their wake. Elias knelt beside Rays, examining the damage. The armor plate had cracked, revealing scorched but intact tissue beneath. "You're all right," Elias murmured. "Tougher than their tech." Rays nudged him softly, breath warm and steady. The mercenaries approached, wide-eyed and shaken. You drove them off," the bearded Merc said. "The council. You made them retreat." "No," Elias replied. "Rays did." He looked toward the horizon where the council ships shrank into the distance. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "They'll come back harder." Rays pressed its massive head against his shoulder, a silent vow. And Elias knew the next battle would decide far more than their survival. The desert had quieted, but the silence was deceptive. Smoke still curled from scorched walkways, and the acrid scent of burnt metal lingered like a stubborn shadow. Elias walked through the outpost, observing mercenaries moving with a newfound respect, not just for him but for the being at his side. Rays followed, massive and unhurried, every step shaking the ground just enough to remind anyone who watched that this was no ordinary companion. The council's defeat had been decisive, but whispers of retaliation persisted. Across the sector, entire fleets had been reassigned, intelligence crews scrambled, and every operative aware that a human had stood toe-to-toe with their apex predator and survived. Elias, however, didn't look at the wider galaxy. He looked at the people around him, the ragged mercenaries who had once sought only credits and the civilians who had learned to move in rhythm with survival. He paused beside the bearded Merc, who had been closest to the front lines during the assault. "You understand now, don't you?" Elias asked. His voice was quiet but firm, the kind of certainty that had kept him alive when the council soldiers had not. The Merc nodded, eyes still wide with awe. "I do. You've changed how I see everything. That thing," he said, gesturing toward Rays, it's more than a predator. It's alive. Intelligent. And you trusted it." Elias offered a small smile. "Trust is rare in this galaxy. But some things deserve it." He ran a hand along Rays' armored flank, feeling the heat of its body ripple through the scales and plates. Rays emitted a low, resonant rumble, almost a purr. Elias crouched slightly, meeting the creature's gaze. Its amber eyes held depth and history, the memories of a hunted species, the loyalty forged in fire and blood, and a silent understanding that they had survived together not by chance but by choice. Across the plateau, other mercenaries and civilians were talking quietly amongst themselves, sharing the tale of a man and a predator who had turned back the might of the council. Some spoke with reverence, others with disbelief, but all were changed. Elias felt it, the subtle shift in perception that only extraordinary deeds could provoke. "Where do we go from here?" the younger Merc asked, stepping closer. His tone carried uncertainty and hope tangled together. Elias scanned the horizon. The twin suns were low, painting long shadows across dunes and ruins alike. "We go where survival demands," he said. "But we also go where justice matters." He let the words hang, weighty and deliberate. "The council will test us again. They will not forget the lesson today." The air shifted then, a distant vibration but not a threat. It was a signal, the first movement of race kind emerging from hidden valleys and caves, drawn by the survival of one of their own. A small group appeared on the ridge across the plain, their forms sleek and glimmering with the faint iridescence of the species' natural armor. They paused, watching, calculating, and then approached cautiously. Elias straightened, placing a hand on Ray's shoulder. "They're curious," he murmured. "And they've waited a long time to see someone who respects what they are." Ray's nudged him as if confirming the sentiment. Elias allowed himself a rare moment of pride, not for victory, not for survival, but for recognition from those who truly mattered. The council's shadow lingered, but the galaxy's perception had already begun to shift. Tales of Elias Ward, the human who had befriended death itself, were spreading like wildfire. Systems previously loyal to the tribunal began questioning orders. Mercenaries refused to hunt the predator. Civilians whispered of alliances that no soldier could dismantle. A single human had shown the galaxy that strength was not measured in firepower alone, but in courage, judgment, and the capacity to understand what others could not. Ray stepped forward, releasing a low growl that resonated across the plateau. Elias followed, his hand resting lightly on its head, guiding it with a gentle but unwavering authority. Together they approached the newcomers, the other predators, establishing a connection born not of dominance but of trust. The creatures were wary, but recognition flared in their eyes. Ray's had led them here, Elias had been the bridge. The mercenaries watched in awe, the younger ones shifting instinctively closer to him, seeking protection yet inspired by his command. The bond between human and apex predator was no longer a secret. It had become a legend in the making, a lesson written in sand, metal, and amber eyes. Elias looked toward the horizon, toward the distant council fleets still lurking in imagination if not in reality. He allowed himself a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had been accomplished and the responsibility of what was yet to come. "We've won today," he said, voice steady, carrying to those around him. "But this isn't the end. It's the beginning of something far larger. And we'll meet it together." Ray's pressed its massive head against his shoulder once more, a final gesture of loyalty and affirmation. Elias reached out, fingers brushing over the armored scales, feeling the warmth, the life, and the consciousness within. Behind them, the desert stretched endlessly, an arena now calm but alive with possibility. The council's forces would return, certainly. Other threats would arise, each testing courage, strategy, and the limits of trust. But for the first time, Elias knew the galaxy would never see him, or Ray's, the same way again. He took a step forward and Ray's followed. Side by side, human and predator advanced toward the horizon where sunlight kissed the dunes, and the wind whispered of stories yet untold, battles yet to be fought, and legends yet to be forged. The world had learned a harsh truth. It was not the apex predator that inspired fear, but the human who had earned its loyalty. And that was a force the galaxy could not ignore. Together, they disappeared into the fading light, leaving only footprints and the echo of a bond that would reshape the stars.